Every once in a while you see a motion picture advertised and it says years and years in the making. Well, today's show has been at least a year in the making because I wanted to interview this gentleman at least a year ago when he was the brand new superintendent of the Harford County school system. Well, a year's gone by and I'm lucky enough to be able to interview him today. We're going to be talking to Dr. Sean Bulson, the superintendent of the Harford County Schools. I'm Ken Kiedrowski, and you're on location. And this is On Location, and I'm Ken Kiedrowski, and guess where we are today? Well, you already know where we are today. We're at the central offices. Is that how you refer to it? The decentral offices of the Harford County School District?
Singular, I guess. Central office.
Central office, yes. And Dr. Sean Bulson. Sean, thank you very much for being with me. Of course, On Location does a lot of things. We're visiting gardens, we're visiting tourist train outlets, we're visiting baseball stadiums, but every once in a while we like to focus in on a topic that has to do with public school education. And you're a busy guy. I wanted to do this show with you at least a year ago, but you rolled into town and you just got so busy, rightfully so, with everything that's going on in the Harford County Schools that I'm very fortunate to have you on the show today. So one of the questions I often ask superintendents when I have the opportunity to do so is, what attracted you to the idea of being a superintendent of schools?
I followed a pretty, I guess, traditional trajectory for superintendents. I started as a classroom teacher, and then the opportunities just kept coming. Department chair, school-based administrator, I was a high school principal. And you know, every time you move up in an education role, you see that you get to influence a few more students, like the purview gets a little greater.
Yeah.
And it was a logical progression. I mean, I went to central office in Montgomery County, Maryland, and I was a community superintendent there when I left, and then I moved on to be a superintendent in North Carolina. So, you know, it's really been nice to see the impact you can have and to have the opportunity to learn about new communities and, you know, get to just work with so many people. So,
what's the difference between a community superintendent and the superintendent, or is there no difference?
well, I was in charge of one part of the county. I mean, Montgomery County is so large. There's over 200 schools there. I was responsible when I left for 36 of them. That in itself is a pretty large school district.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's nothing but large school districts in the state of Maryland. So the joke is Harford County, I believe, has 38,000 students, and the school district that I retired from in New York State had 2,000 on a good day. So anyway, what's some of the training you had? You told me some of the positions that you had. What was your educational background to reach where you are now?
Well, I actually transitioned into education. My undergraduate degree is in international relations. But I took a good education turn on that and became an ESL teacher. So I taught English as a second language. And so I got to do my international relations just within a classroom. And I evolved from there, and I went back and got, you know, the degree to become an administrator, and then ultimately got my doctorate in educational leadership.
So you learned in undergraduate the international relations, how to negotiate, how to work with people?
I think it was more just learning. I mean, probably the underlying lesson is people come from different backgrounds and different perspectives, and you need to find ways to help them all work together.
Well, if that isn't just something that's very basic and most necessary in any public school.
But at times lacking.
Oh, come on, we're perfect. Speaking as retired school administrator, I mean, come on, we're perfect. So let's talk about what you did during that past year. You had this entry plan. So you were talking about almost everybody except the people in the drive-through at McDonald's. You were everywhere.
I had to. I mean, last year we have 54 schools. I got to each of them at least 4 times, and that included multiple sit-downs with principals.
I know a substitute teacher in Norrisville Elementary School who told me she was teaching and she looks out and you're standing watching her, and she said, I think the quote was, "I was never so nervous in my entire life."
Because I'm such a scary person, right?
Well,
right.
No,
yeah.
just She
Yeah.
knew.
Yeah.
She knew the bow tie, and she knew that who you were. And anyway, so you visited the schools at least 4 times. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Well, you have to learn the schools, and I still have a lot to learn about them, and I'll continue learning. But to get out and see what's going on in the school, get a sense of the physical space.
Yeah.
But because we have 54 very different schools.
Can I quiz you on what's the mascot of each school? You
Nope.
ready? No, okay. No. We won't do it. That's the next show.
Okay.
That's the next show. We'll give you the bonus round and see how you do on that, or we'll play Jeopardy, mascot Jeopardy. All right. So you talk to you talk to leaders in the community at large, leaders inside the school, and then moms and dads and students and grandparents and all
We
the
had
rest
community
of them.
meetings in each of the 9 middle schools. So we had community
Yeah.
meetings representing sort of all. So we had 9 evening community meetings where people came and talked and gave us feedback on a couple of basic questions: what works, what doesn't work. And then we met again the community leaders and all that. So just to get an overview of who's here, really, what assets do we have to work with.
Were any of the community leaders kind of surprised or amazed or pleased that you were taking the time to talk to them? Did they expect this from you, or did you?
I think everyone was appreciative.
Yeah.
To have just to be reached out to. I don't know about surprised or amazed.
Yeah.
And there's different degrees. Some people had experience talking to superintendents all the time. Others maybe not as much. But like I said, it's important just to take stock of what a community has to offer and how we can ultimately use all that to work together on behalf of the kids.
Well, one of the reasons why I guess I phrased it that way is because it just strikes me I'm only meeting you today. So folks at home, the first time I met this gentleman was about 45 minutes ago. I just think that you strike me as a different type of a superintendent that this district hasn't had in a while. You're out there, you're advocating more, you're busier, you're making sure that things are not forgotten or swept under a rug or anything. You're going for it, you're going full bore, and you're so busy. That's one of the reasons why maybe your wife forgot what you looked like last year, because you were so darn busy.
Well, by nature, I'm an includer. I mean, I like to involve people in decisions and conversations and learn from that. And so that's why I need to be out there. But that'll take its toll in other places. No one's perfect. No one has more hours than anyone else.
No.
It's just how we spend them, and it's been important to me to be out there and learn as much about this community as possible.
Yeah. I kind of think that because this year is 2019, and because I don't want to date this show too much, but recently there has been like one day where there have been 2 mass shootings in a 24-hour period. School safety has to be way up there on your list.
That was one of the first district-wide initiatives we took on last year, and it was timely. I mean, everyone's been thinking about safety, and it's always a key element in education, but there were some shooting incidents that occurred in this county entirely too close to home, and we knew we needed to ramp up our work on that. But probably the best part of doing that here in the county is we were able to tap in to the experts here who aren't in the school system. I mean, we have one person in charge of security for the school district, so we relied on the help of the sheriff's department and the 3 municipalities in town, in the county, that also have police departments, as well as emergency management and other first responders to help us design training on behalf of our students and our schools. And we have trained, by the end of this month, we'll have trained every single employee on critical incident response, but we have so many other elements going on with regard to safety. But that was our first really big district-wide initiative. And I mean, there really is no better place to start than safety.
Absolutely. So what other initiatives, or what would be another initiative that you'd like to talk about?
Well, if I look at last year, I think about the entry plan, the safety work, and then the budget. And so there was a lot of time on budget and sort of approaching that differently. But now that we have those things behind us, I see we're starting to move into what's next, what's the future. And looking at outcomes for students and how we frame that. We have an initiative we're kicking off that we're calling North Star Pathway, which is a very close collaboration with the community college and we'll soon be involving, I think, a lot more of our business and industry leaders to help us as well. But then there's also a lot of internal work, looking particularly at how we train our people to better be able to support our students and just the organization in general.
You've gone through this first year, and I think it's safe to say there was some bullet biting going on because you had to take a look very carefully at what the payroll was like, where all the expenditures were. You had to check the list, check it once, check it twice, check it 3 times, go over it, and you take a scalpel and try to be very judicious in where you were doing the cutting. And hopefully that was the year that was, and you won't have to be taking out the scalpel anytime soon, hopefully. But how do you view future funding? I mean, what can you do, what can the community do to let certain people in positions of power know that the schools are important, that the schools are vitally important, because if you take care of the students, that's just an investment in the future?
There are a couple key messages about our budget that I think would help people understand the circumstances. This school district has cut positions in every budget since 2011. So when the recession hit, funding caught up and we started cutting positions. So for the last nearly 10 years, we've cut positions every year. This year, and part of, there's been 2 big things driving that. The school district revenue hasn't really kept up with salary increases or healthcare cost increases. Those are the 2 biggest drivers for us. Just keeping pace with salaries in this region, it's not aggressive, but it's something that you need to stay on track with. And so we need to remain competitive here. But then healthcare, that's a national issue. It's not something that was invented in Harford County or in Maryland. And those prices are driving some of the deficits we've seen. So revenue, which in the school districts is a combination of federal funds, state funds, and local funds, needs to cover that change. Because if you're not covering the healthcare and the personnel costs, then you're cutting somewhere. And we'd been cutting, and so we were running out of easy cuts, and so we had to do a little harder. My goal, my hope for this year is that we made a lot of hard decisions this year. My hope is that next year I can bring a budget that won't require any position cuts. We've done a lot of educating. We've worked closely with our county leadership. We know that there's a lot being discussed at the state level around education funding. And so if we can come through this year and not cut positions to start the next school year, that'll be a huge victory. And so we'll be working on how to make that happen.
Wasn't there a recent grant which will be able to give the current teachers an increase in pay to help them out?
While we cut positions this year, one of the reasons for doing that was to ensure that the people who remained employed with us got raises. And so, in fact, district-wide, the average raise for employees in this school district, I believe, was about 4.7%. The average raise for teachers in this district was more like 5.1%. So with some help from the state, with some help just from the plan, our negotiations with our unions and all that, we were able to ensure, on average, every employee in this district got nearly a 5% raise. And so, I mean, that's important for us to know, that people realize one of the reasons we did so much cutting is so we could make sure we were taking care of the people who were here.
Do you have any idea where Harford County ranks with other school districts in Maryland as far as, you know, the highest paying school district, the lowest paying school district, et cetera?
It's not an easy thing. You got to pick a point to measure. So, for example, we were in the middle of the state if you look at starting teacher pay. But if you look at more senior teachers, we were actually a little lower in the state. But if you look at starting teacher plus benefits, because we actually have a very comprehensive benefits package, starting teacher plus benefits, we were third in the state. So it's all a function of how you want to look at it.
Oh, so you can do anything with facts and numbers and statistics.
Well,
and
you try to be
everything else.
transparent, but it's hard to have one simple answer because there's just a lot of variables that impact what a person takes home.
I don't know, that what you just told me reminds me of this old story when computers, I hope I'm not aging myself too much, but when computers first came in to the administrative office where I was, and I was told that computers would make life so much easier in education.
How'd that work out?
It would just be so easy. You'd be amazed. Well, you know, now you have more facts and figures, and since I was in New York State, Albany wanted even more disaggregation and everything else that you can possibly do with the computer. So anyway, so yeah, you can do interesting thing with fun with numbers. So you've been here a year now, and you're used to, well, you were in Maryland before, so you know all about the teams and the food and everything else, so it's not a big culture shock being here. So you're settling in the community and everything else, and you know, you're hopefully now, the budget is settling down a little bit, maybe not to everybody's satisfaction, but you got to start somewhere. And now you're looking ahead now for the next big year, and what do you think? Dr. Bulson, what do you think? Where are we going? What's down the road a little bit?
We have some exciting stuff coming. We're looking, I mean, I think it's important for a school district to constantly do this, be in a better place to understand what it takes to prepare students for this economy, for this world that they're living in now, not the one from 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so we're doing some things to make sure that we're preparing our students to be successful out there. The biggest one has to do with our North Star initiative. Looking at I think what you've heard, if you look at mission or vision statements from school districts all over the country, they're going to talk about college readiness or career readiness. We're going to make a commitment to give students college experience or career experience before they graduate, so we know for certain that they're ready to be successful when they leave us. So we're trying to shift from that word readiness to experience. My goal is that a much higher percentage of our students will have had experience with college courses before they graduate. We're doing a lot of work right now to make that happen. We have a fantastic partner in Harford Community College to help us. But also we need to work more closely with local industry. You know, we're in a place where there are more job vacancies than there are people looking for jobs. And we have a responsibility to make sure we're helping those employers find the people who are prepared to do it. And so, you know, if you go all the way back to my entry plan, it's about learning what the county needs, and the workforce and the economy are some places where we have some needs that aren't entirely met just yet.
Well, I think the community is very, very fortunate to have an individual like yourself who's coming in here who wants to learn more and doesn't come in saying, oh, look, I know all the answers. I've been in some school districts where that happened, where somebody comes in and says, I know all the answers, and that didn't go over well at all. But you're learning, you're growing in the position, so I can only see good things. And I'm glad I can only see good things because I have 4 grandchildren in the Harford County School District, and I'm glad you're in charge, and because they and all the other students will be beneficiaries. And so I want to thank you for finally having the time to talk with me, Sean Bulson. Thank you. Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here on location with me, Ken Kidrowski. Thanks for your time. I value your time, and we'll see you next time. Well, since we talked to the superintendent of schools in Harford County, it's only appropriate that we have a lesson review. So what did we learn today? We learned that, well, any superintendent has a lot on his plate and a lot on his mind, and certainly that's the case with Dr. Sean Bulson. Came into the school district, had to talk to a lot of people, had to find the ins and outs and everything else. I mean, they gave him a lot of information about the job when he arrived, but he had to find out some things by himself. And he has to do what he can to make the school system a finer-tuned school district. Every superintendent wants to do that. And every superintendent wants to improve instruction and to make the schools safer and to do everything else that's going to benefit the community at large, and especially, most importantly, the students of the community, the students of the school district. So that's been our show today. Another in our series of On Locations focusing in on public school education. My name is Ken Kidrowski, and you've been On Location.